My friends, I'm looking at the map and just what a disaster. I don't even know where to start. Long story short, the Russians launched a major offensive in this sector north of Lyman. The Ukrainian defenses on the dominant heights along the Zherebets river have been breached. Worn down by weeks of bombardment and infiltrations, the Ukrainians eventually yielded more ground. As a result, the Russian 20th Army broke through and advanced 10 kilometers. The offensive culminated with the capture of the village of Nove, whose fall changed the dynamic of the entire front.
All hope is failing, my lord! The battle is almost done!
Meanwhile, further south, the 25th Army is storming the town of Torske. As you know, with the Russians by now, they're a bit unpredictable. Now the towns of Lyman, Borova, Izium, even Slavyansk are at risk of falling into enemy hands. It's not looking good for our beloved Ukrainskaya Armia.
The Russians are coming, the Russians are coming.
Apart from one Ukraine war commentator, we all know who, the GOAT. All the others talk about the desperate situation in that part of the front. Here in April, journalist Butusov said, "It is necessary to save the Limansky front as a whole. Reserves are needed here, replenishment is needed." But already by May, he became black-pilled. The enemy's offensive cannot be stopped. So today we'll go through a step-by-step breakdown of this battle, analyze the underlying causes of this military disaster, and as always try to establish what could happen next. To fully comprehend what happened in the Lyman sector, we have to jump back in time. It all started in 1646, under the reign of Tsar Alexei Mikhailovich Romanov, when the Russians built the Mayaka fort along the banks of the Siversky Donetsk river to protect from attacks of the Crimean Tatars. Just kidding, not that far back, we'll just begin this story in January 2025. Welcome to History Legends, and hear the latest news of the Russo-Ukraine war. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. As you know, some of my videos have been targeted with limited order ads, so make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal to keep the show running. Thank you to everyone that has already helped, and welcome to the headquarters. Alright, since I'm about to depart for a special mission in Africa, I will leave you guys with a girthy frontline update. That was a frontline in the northern Donetsk Oblast area at the beginning of the year. In this sector, the operational objective for Russia was to recapture the town of Lyman, which the Russian armed forces lost control of on the 1st of October 2022 during Ukraine's Kharkiv offensive. We all remember these telegram posts from this period. The Russian command decided to transfer a certain amount of the Southern Military District Reserve to Krasny Lyman, with the aim of ensuring the development of a counteroffensive in the near future. It was all cope. I mean, the reinforcements did arrive 2 years later. No, actually, 3 years later. Time flies. Overall, it took the Russian army many battles to fully capture the east bank of the Zherebets River, an important tactical objective in the region. From there, the Russian command had two options. Option 1 tasked the 25th Army to launch a frontal assault against the Torske urban area. After that, march towards Lyman. Option 2, have the 20th Army cross the Zherebets River between Nevsky and Makivka. It's a difficult maneuver since the terrain benefits the defender, but if successful, it's going to flank Ukrainian positions and allow Russian forces to bypass the Torske area and strike straight against Lyman. No spoilers, but one of the two armies decided to drop in one of the most remote parts of the map, wait out the entire match, and claim the win at the last minute. Let's begin, shall we? On the 4th of January, the region of Ivanivka entered the Grey Zone. A small Russian storm detachment crossed the river. Here you can see 9 soldiers as part of one of these assault squads, trying to cross over this body of water. Once this was done, they quickly spread out across town. Like African migrants in Ceuta, one team cut a path through lines of barbed wire and then let all of their comrades through. From there, they infiltrated the village, making sure no Ukrainian stronghold was left behind.
A unit is running from the battlefield!
Here's a good view of the position. We see the Zherebets River and the swampy pond all around. Beyond, we see the settlement of Ivanivka, and behind it, the heights overlooking the village. In response to this enemy incursion, Ukrainian tanks were immediately dispatched to mop up the village by releasing massive loads at point blank into every house. This left the Russians in a sticky situation. They were about to lose the bridgehead, but instead of giving up, they decided to double down. In the following hours, fighting spread to the southern edge of the village, right along this ridgeline. Whoever controlled these heights commanded the entire battlefield. As you can notice, there were trenches and underground firing positions all along this ridgeline. But then came men of the 144th Guards Motor Rifle Division. As part of small tactical rifle teams, they pushed across tree lines and mopped up entire fortified bastions. At one point, we see 4 Ukrainian soldiers running out from a dugout that had been smoked. Shortly after, they're followed by another 2 of their comrades. Together, they run along the main trench, dodging grenades and drones. They entered this dugout, but then it got FPV'd. The Ukrainian fire team then exits the dugout. A first soldier gets out. He's inside a crater, and the moment he peeks out, he gets hit by a bullet. Then 3 others are left in this crater. One of them seems to be badly wounded. The Russians are approaching. Something has to be done fast. The 2 other soldiers are trying to lift their heads to find a way out. But this is impossible because there are bullets whistling left and right. And while they were thinking about what to do next, boom! An FPV drone flew right into their position. The only words I can think of is, war's hell. This is just a glimpse of the war and it's just horrible. Poor guys. Poor guys. 2 days later, Ivanivka officially came under Russian control. Against the odds, the 144th Guards Motor Rifle Division achieved the unthinkable. They had secured a sizable bridgehead over the Zherebets river, and they even managed to capture the surrounding hilltops. What a disaster for our beloved Ukrainskaya Armia. And like the saying goes, "Будет только хуже," it will only get worse. By the 10th of January, reports came from aggressive Russian recon missions shoveling their way out of Makivka and Ivanivka. 1 week later, the Russians had pushed 2 kilometers south of Ivanivka on the western side of this swampy lake. While the Ukrainian command tried to figure out what to do next, on the 23rd, the Russians penetrated the Ukrainian front west of Makivka and advanced 1,800 meters. As you can see, they managed to capture this entire forest. About this offensive action, Ukrainian journalist Butusov said, "In an attempt to break through to Ukrainian positions, the enemy rushed in a crazy banzai attack."
Right.
Are these banzai attacks in the room with us right now? February 2025. On the 2nd of February, Russian forces located in Ivanivka pushed out and cleared these tree lines on both sides of the road leading towards Kolodyazi. To fully grasp the importance of this move, we have to look at it from a 3D perspective. As you can see here, there's this slope going up for 2,000 meters. And at the end of it, there's this hilltop that overlooks the entire region. This means that by controlling this position, Russian troops won't even need drones to see the enemy coming from afar. By the 6th of February, the entire area around Ivanivka and Terny was now in the gray zone. The next day, Russian storm units took advantage of the bad weather to strike. They advanced 2 kilometers, mopping up this entire forest before reaching the eastern edge of Terny, after which the village was surrounded on 3 sides. In reality, it was already GG well played, as 2 Russian infantry fighting vehicles managed to get a foothold inside the first houses of Yampolivka. On the 11th of February, the Russian command along the Zherebets river paused operations near Ivanivka and pivoted north to strike in the Makivka sector. There, they cleared 2,800 meters on the west bank of the river. At the same time, further south, the Ukrainian 60th Mechanized Brigade repelled multiple enemy armored attacks in the direction of Yampolivka. In this footage, you can see 2 Russian BMPs and a tank equipped with a mine troll. Moments later, they start getting shelled. One of the 2 AFVs seems to have been knocked out, and all the personnel are falling back towards the one that is still functioning. The second BMP escaped another artillery barrage before being struck by an anti-tank FPV drone. Then the montage or editing cuts, and what happened next is a bit misleading. It glued 2 different events that took place at 2 different locations, and made it seem as if they had happened back to back. So the first combat action happened at the northern tip of the village of Yampolivka. The first BMP was knocked out right here. The second BMP was hit by a drone around this area, but seemed to have been able to continue its mission. And then the video shows another drone strike where the BMP gets hit by a drone followed by a trail of fire. Definitely not looking good, and the crew runs away. But this happened near the original spot where the first BMP got hit. Look, foul, yellow card, for tricking the audience with video editing. So this is a reminder to everyone that what we see is just a glimpse of reality. Okay, so the follow-up Russian attack on Yampolivka failed. Or did it? A couple days later, around the 16th of February, the Russians went back on the attack. This time, one of their armored columns tried to cut off Yampolivka from the rear. In this video, we can see two armored vehicles that wanted to take advantage of the snowstorm to avoid being detected by enemy drones. But since this is a footage from a Ukrainian drone, you can already see where this is going. The lead tank is equipped with a mine troll and uses it to plow through, detonating all the mines on its path. Eventually, the BMP behind the tank stopped and disembarked its entire infantry component. The BMP moved a little bit off path and then reached for the moon, after which bomber drones from the 63rd Mechanized Brigade harassed the Russian soldiers hiding in the tree lines. Just like the offensives on the Isonzo, just one more time. On the 23rd of February, Russian forces advanced 700 meters along a 4.5 kilometer front north of Makivka. With this flanking attack, the Russians were putting the Ukrainians west of Novovodiane in a very critical situation. And that's not all, because on the 28th, the Russians tried to break through between Ivanivka and Nevsky. Emphasis on they tried. In this one, a Russian BMP-3 driving along a path that had been previously demined. But Ukrainian engineers of the 62nd Mechanized Brigade decided to troll the Russians by remote mining this sector, which then immobilized the IFV. After that, drone operators from the 4th Battalion of the Separate Presidential Brigade turned the BMP-3 into a complete tax write-off. Nothing more beautiful than teamwork and tag teaming your enemies. March 2025. In the first 2 weeks of March, nothing much happened in that part of the front. Overall, the AFU 60th, 63rd, and 66th Mechanized Brigade worked on containing the Russian advance against Lyman. Oh yeah, we can also mention how the 63rd Mechanized Brigade, fighting in the Zarishne sector, became the 5th unit of the armed forces of Ukraine to be equipped with the new BTR-4s. It's a great upgrade because the BTR-4 surpasses the MTLB, BTR-80, and M113 APCs they previously had in firepower, mobility, and protection, but especially in firepower due to the BTR-4's BM7 Paris module. With its 30mm autocannon, ATGMs, and advanced thermal optics, it's just more powerful than the previous armored vehicles they had. Plus, it stems from a domestic line of production, so it's definitely going to facilitate repairs and maintenance. By the 12th of March, the entire front line between Makivka, Nevsky, and Ivanivka was now in the gray zone, with Russian sabotage units trying to infiltrate enemy lines in the direction of Nove. At the same time, a motorized rifle unit pushed towards the settlement of Kolodezi. Here you can see a Russian BMP that was hit by a drone. The infantrymen inside quickly disembarked after the vehicle was immobilized. Then the riflemen are struck by artillery shells, and the survivors are harassed by swarms of FPV drones. Ukrainian resistance stiffened, and the Russian command quickly had to funnel reinforcements to allow its spearheads to carry on the operation. They could not allow the enemy to contain them in the small bridgehead. That's when the Ukrainians released some drone footage of this causeway crossing over the Zherebets river in the Ivanivka sector. I can't show it to you, but apparently the Russians suffered badly. We could see about 23 soldiers laying KIA in the swamps. Are they all Russian soldiers? Don't know. Did they all fall at the same time? Don't know. I guess we just have to take what the Ukrainians say for granted. 2 days after this attack against Kolodezi, Russian fire teams advanced into Novolyubivka on the west bank of the Zherebets river in front of Nevsky. One of these units was spotted by Ukrainian drone operators of the 66th Mechanized Brigade. We see 3 soldiers walking through the bushes towards the main street. Moments later, the pointman of this patrol gets shot and falls to the ground. There's another reason why I wanted to show you this footage. As you can see, the river in this sector is particularly narrow. You could literally place planks of wood to cross over. And this is probably what they've done. And this is exactly the sort of low-tech tactics that their ancestors have used to troll the Germans. By the 15th of March, Russian forces captured the entire settlement of Novolyubivka. As part of this last move, they progressed 2 kilometers in depth on a 4-kilometer front. On the 18th of March, the Russian command launched another strike between Nevsky and Makivka. There they secured a 650-meter deep bridgehead over the Zherebets river. Overall, this was the fourth bridgehead the Russian 20th Combined Arms Army had established on the west bank of the Zherebets river. It seems that by that point, the Russian command had picked option 1, bypass from the west the heavily fortified Zarechny-Torske sector. Also notice this, look at how far the gray zone is reaching out of Ivanivka, almost 4 kilometers to the northwest. And let's just say the Russians know how to handle such an unexpected bulge. It was so large that even TSA agents would have no other choice but to take a closer look at it. 19th of March, Yampolivka. Russian riflemen were spotted at the same location where they attacked a month earlier in mid-February. Here we see a 3-man Russian patrol resting in the tree line waiting for further orders. Poor Vladi, he didn't even have time to finish his yubilnoye cookies as they got ambushed by FPV drones.
Fuck.
Never say no to a small PRW. In reality, Russian storm detachments secured this 1,000-meter-long tree line, as well as these woods right next to it. Now as for our beloved Ukrainskaya Armia, 2 days later on the 21st of March, the entire front collapsed. All this area that was contested officially came under Russian control. 4.5 kilometers in length and 3.5 kilometers in girth, a squared penetration. Meanwhile, some of their strikers were pushing into the penalty area 2.5 kilometers west of Novolyubivka. Something was brewing in this sector, but for the fireworks to start, the Russians would have to bring more reinforcements, and they would have to go harder than last time. During this time, all support units were also on high alert, especially in this massive forested area along the Seversky Donetsk river. On the 22nd, somewhere near Torske, this Ukrainian pickup truck with an EW antenna mounted on its roof was destroyed by a fiber optics drone. In this one, it's a Ukrainian 2-man electronic warfare station that was hit. And here it's a Ukrainian 120mm mortar position that was eliminated. 3 days later, Russian Orlan and Zala recon drones were scanning the area outside of Zarechny. However, they were immediately hunted down by Ukrainian drone operators. Then came artillery units that pelted each other. Here a 2K-25 Krasnopol guided projectile of the Russian 25th Army flew to visit a base used by Ukrainian enemy drone operators in Zarechny. Coincidence? Could it be the same drone operators that we mentioned right before? Maybe. This goes to show that drone operators are akin to camping on the battlefield, but it's not without the risk either. Oh yeah, we can also mention this spectacular counterattack launched by the 3rd Assault Brigade, Azov. On the 23rd of March, fighters from 2nd Company, 1st Battalion advanced 1,800 meters and regained the hamlet of Nadiia. I say hamlet because there are only about 10 buildings in this settlement. I'll summarize what happened, but if you're interested, they published a video of the entire operation on YouTube. Everything started with the elimination of all Russian recon drones flying over the area of operations. Meanwhile, on the ground, the assault detachment was supported by at least 2 tanks, which blasted to dust Russian positions. That's when 4 M113 APCs came out of their hiding spot and drove right on top of enemy positions. After that, all the heavily armed stormtroopers disembarked from their vehicles. It became critical for the troops to spread out and take cover into the woods. After facing enemy fire, they advanced along the tree lines up until the first houses of Nadiia. The attack was swift and decisive. We can see that the 3rd Assault Brigade Azov is an elite formation. At the same time, during this firefight, Russian casualties seem to have been pretty low. We can believe that the majority of the Russian defenders simply retreated when the Ukrainians attacked. Interestingly, it seems the entire operation was coordinated by Andrei Beletsky himself, the commander of the 3rd Assault Brigade Azov. Talk about micromanagement. Imagine working at the office with the big boss of the company shadowing you. Despite this tactical victory, the situation along the Zherebets river became critical for the AFU. On the 26th of March, the Russians were back in full force. Southeast of Ivanivka, Terny came under Russian control. If you remember, in March 2024, exactly 1 year before that, the Russians tried to storm Terny, but were eventually pushed back by the 3rd Assault Brigade Azov. However, this time, it was mission accomplished. But that's not even the worst part. This Russian grouping stormed 2,300 meters worth of tree lines and forests. Some of the recon patrols were spotted 2,000 meters further near the settlement of Katerynivka. What a disaster! These Ukrainian troops here were also about to get encircled. Legend says that they were told that reinforcements were on the way. Whoops, next day, Russian breakthrough. The Russians were now inside Katerynivka, and this force was now in the gray zone. Despite an increasing number of bomber drone strikes, the entire sector was getting flanked by Russian units. In this one, you can see the point of view of men of the Russian 144th Division. The command staff identifies targets, the bees are immediately let loose. Then it's automatic grenade launchers and artillery that bombard and pin down enemy troops. Meanwhile, an assault detachment is formed. A bit like on Uber, a BMP-3 is activated and then attached to an infantry squad. We can also see the BMP-3 firing at enemy positions. It's a real hail of fire that fell on the defenders. Moments later, the Russian riflemen disembarked and took the trench by storm. Then in groups of 2 they spread out and cleared one dugout after another. Although many of the soldiers were equipped with AK-74s, this one here was armed with a heavily customized AK-105 with custom handguard, vertical grip, paint job, suppressor, and a red dot. Such weapons are mostly used by Spetsnaz. All this to say that the gold standard map by Deep State UA scoping a little bit in this case is not 100% accurate. For example, on the 27th of March, Russian units were already roaming in the sector, 1.5 kilometers beyond the line of contact. We see a 3-man rifle team. No, it's a horde. No, it's a massive human wave advancing through a trench network. But since it's fully exposed, they're then spotted by Ukrainian drones. This fortified bastion you just saw is part of an entire defensive belt going from Nove to the Zherebets river. But then notice the lack of fortifications between Ivanivka and Katerynivka. It's not a surprise that it's right in this direction that the Russians struck. The Ukrainian command didn't even have time to scramble for reinforcements that they faced another crisis. By the 31st of March, Russian armed forces advanced 2 kilometers in this direction, and another 1.5 kilometer in this one. There they penetrated right in between these 2 bastions and segmented the entire Ukrainian line of defense. For the south, in Torske, Ukrainian drone operators of the 63rd Mechanized Brigade destroyed an Albatros M5 reconnaissance drone. This one is said to be equipped with a night camera and a neural network that identifies people in the scanned area in real time. A real lethal weapon. By that point, we can say that the Ukrainian 63rd Mechanized Brigade, located in Torske, did a pretty good job at repelling the assaults of Russia's 25th Command Arms Army. A couple hundred meters from Russian lines stood the 105th Battalion of this 63rd Mechanized Brigade. Here's a glimpse of the daily life of its soldiers. You can see what their trenches look like. Lots of sandbags used to reinforce the lateral sides of the alleyways. For a 360 defense, camouflage nets are added on top to protect them from drones. And here are their living quarters. It's like going on a hunting trip with the boys, but this time the force shoots back. Meanwhile, others watch out on the horizon for signs of enemy forces. Compare these fortified positions that we just saw to the ones zigzagging in open field that provide absolutely zero cover and where the soldiers are fully exposed. April 2025. By the 1st of April, Russian soldiers had already been detected 2,000 meters west of Novolyubivka. It was a smart move because it protected the right flank of this breakthrough going towards Katerynivka. A little further north, Ukrainian drones spotted another Russian squad, but the end was pretty tragic. Imagine being in his position. Maybe he had already managed to dodge 2 drones. He's exhausted, but they keep coming at him relentlessly. War is hell. This footage is also interesting because we can analyze the type of environment these assault squads progressed in. In this frame, we can clearly see this balka, this sort of natural valley that is flanked by multiple forested areas that can provide natural cover. At the same time, Russian artillery was already shelling the settlement of Ridkodub. This could indicate the general axis of attack of the division assigned to this sector. It's not a surprise that by the 5th of April, all this ground was annexed by the Russian Federation. They advanced 1.5 kilometers deep by 3.5 kilometers wide. 2 days later, the Ukrainians were forced to abandon this entire salient. If anyone was left there, GG well played, time to get out. The big question was, could the Russian command keep this sweeping movement going? So they called another batch of mujiks from across the river. Once again, some Russian unit was ambushed close to this swampy pond near Ivanivka. This goes to show how difficult it is to actually bring reinforcements to the line of contact in the age of drones. If a recon drone spots you, you have about 1 to 2 minutes to take cover before swarms of FPV drones try to annihilate you. And this also goes to show why it's so important to search and destroy for enemy drone bases. But there's more. Here's a beautiful example of propaganda. This post says, 14 Ukrainian soldiers eliminated by FPV kamikaze drones. Recycling the description of this post by War Archive on Telegram. I looked at the footage and all we're certain of is that 13 FPV drones were sent out. But if you look closely, only 4 to 5 different Russian soldiers are actually hit. Many times the drones miss the target, and often it's the same soldier trying to evade enemy drones. Here's another example to support my point. We can see how the Russian fire team is composed of 5 men, and they're slowly walking towards the contact line. Moments later, they were detected and eliminated by the bees. Look! The drones were so effective that it stalled the entire Russian offensive. No! The operation continued. Because on the 8th of April, the Ukrainian command had to deal with another set of bad news. And I can tell you, it wasn't about GTA 6 being delayed by 6 months. The Russian 20th Army unleashed its assault detachments. They penetrated Ukrainian lines, and this brought them right inside Katerynivka. After a difficult battle at the end of the day, the men of the 144th Guards Motor Rifle Division raised their banner at the edge of the village. The culmination of almost 20 days of uninterrupted fighting. That's not the only place where the Russians tried to break through. After Russia's 20th Army completely ravaged the rear area of the AFU, further south, the 25th Army also wanted to taste some of this glory. They got a taste of their own medicine instead. It's so bad. Who wrote this? It may or may not have been me. Around the 5th of April, a Russian assault detachment pushed towards Torske. In this footage, a 4-man team stormed the Ukrainian trench. A first drone goes boom, then bomber drones and cluster munitions do the rest of the work. Once again, think of all the resources needed to eliminate just 4 soldiers. 3 kilometers from there, closer to Yampolivka, the 60th Mechanized Brigade targeted another Russian infantry unit. We can see that the Russian 25th Army's attempt to take the Torske urban area head-on was facing stiff resistance. After all the successes in the Nevsky-Katerynivka axis, other Russian divisions also pressed forward. On the 9th of April, the Russian armed forces also attempted to regain control of Nadiia, which you remember the 3rd Assault Brigade Azov recaptured in March. Here we see the work of riflemen of the 3rd Motor Rifle Division clearing the dugouts around that much contested hamlet. We can clearly recognize the village of Nadiia in the following drone footage. Yet, according to Deep State UA, Nadiia is still firmly under Ukrainian control. Actually, you know what? Let's forgive the Deep State UA team for their little delays in frontline changes. Because if they report things accurately, we know exactly what's going to happen to them.
Right to jail.
Or even worse. The Russian commander in Makivka said, "It's my turn to shine now." He was jealous, everybody making breakthroughs except him. However, after sending out the orders, multiple of his BMP-1 and BMP-2s were targeted as they crossed the Zherebets river and destroyed before even reaching the contact line. On the 12th of April, the Russians launched a large attack east of Yampolivka, where they captured this forest. Visibility was all but an illusion in these woods. There was no front line. Muzzle flashes could come from anywhere. Eventually, the Ukrainian soldiers holding these fortified outposts retreated to the second line. As they passed felled trees and craters full of mud. Although every approach was contested with fire, they had no other choice but to yield the forest to the enemy. After this battle, the Russians used this forest as a springboard to storm the village, in which they secured a foothold the next day. Although war is tragic, there's also undeniable moments of pure brotherhood. Around that time, drone operators of the 63rd Mechanized Brigade found an infantryman of the 60th Brigade stuck in some swamps. Nobody really knows how he got there, but luckily for him, they managed to rescue him and pull him out of there. And of course, he was forever grateful to these guys. By the 17th of April, the entire sector north of Torske fell into the gray zone. Many Russian motorcyclists were already infiltrating enemy lines. As I mentioned in one of my previous videos, the problem of using motorcycles is that once you jump off the bike, it's easy for enemy drone operators to spot your approximate location. So in the end, while all the NAFOs were mocking the Russians for forming these motorcycle units, surprise, surprise, Ukraine's Skala regiment announced that it is forming its own motorcycle assault company.
Well, well, well.
Back in Torske, the Ukrainian command tried to launch an armored counterattack, but some of these reinforcements were intercepted and immobilized on the main road by fiber optics drones. 24 hours later, the Russian 144th Division stormed this 1,600-meter-long tree line that controlled the road leading straight into the settlement of Nove. Such a position would allow the second wave to rally just in front of the village before overwhelming Ukrainian defenses. They would only have 700 meters to cross. And that's exactly what happened, because on the 20th of April, Russian assault detachments stormed and secured the entire southern part of the settlement. During this time, the Russian 25th Army was still more or less bogged down in front of Torske. The map was shrinking, but all they were doing was to camp from one hiding spot to another. At the same time, the mere presence of so many Russian regiments in that sector became a problem for the Ukraine command, as it pinned down a considerable number of their own forces. We can also mention how a lot of Ukrainian artillery units were camouflaged in these woods between Lyman and Yampil. Their Russian forces targeted a 2S3 self-propelled gun. What's interesting is that although those are primarily used by the Russians, in April 2024, Ukraine received ex-Iraqi 2S1 and 2S3 Soviet-made howitzers that were purchased through a private British company. In this one, you can clearly see the landscape and the dense forested area between Lyman and the river. There it's a Croatian PAK SA-12 128mm MRLS that was targeted by Russian drones. Now it's also important to note that some of these positions could have been decoys. Here it's a supply truck that was targeted. Meanwhile, in the woods west of Dibrova, the Ukrainian 53rd Mechanized Brigade held firmly against repeated enemy incursions. And in one of these firefights, the Ukrainians captured an enemy soldier. Surprise, surprise, he was also born in Ukraine. What is he doing there? Well, he's native of Luhansk Oblast, one of the two separatist republics. He's said to have been forcefully mobilized and then sent to fight as part of the 123rd Motor Rifle Brigade of the LPR. We should always be very careful as to what these prisoners say in interviews, for obvious reasons. Vladi cuts the camera, let's see if he can outrun a drone. The following weekend, both sides more or less agreed to the Easter truce. It wasn't a complete ceasefire, but combat actions were greatly reduced. During that time in the Lyman sector, the Ukrainians observed the Russian sappers at work trying to recover a destroyed vehicle. Their goal was to rebuild the passage across the Zherebets river to allow vehicles to cross from one bank to another. As you can imagine, this would greatly improve Russia's ability to transfer reinforcements right on the contact line. Now, how did the Russians celebrate the end of the Easter truce? That's right, with some big fireworks. Here, Russian aviation bombarded the village of Ritkodub, where they turned an entire block of houses to dust after dropping their FAB-500 bombs. Further south, on the 25th of April, the 67th Motor Rifle Division of the 25th Combined Arms Army advanced against the northern outskirts of Torske. Tanks covered the assault with direct fire into enemy strongpoints. In the meantime, infantrymen advanced to the woods and engaged enemy forces. As you can see in this part of the video, these assault detachments also used some sort of satchels filled with explosives to clear out underground bastions. So we covered Ritkodub, Torske, now we move north to Makivka. There, the drone unit of the 107th Territorial Defense Brigade blew up multiple pontoons and various crossing points over the Zherebets River. The Russians were most likely trying to concentrate forces in this area in order to flank the Ukrainians sitting in this salient. but other bridges were now destroyed. So transferring forces from the eastern to the western bank of the Zherebets river would take much more time. Now we move all the way south to the Kremina forestry. I literally don't remember when's the last time this part of the front changed. In some sectors there isn't much left of the forest. We can also clearly see the trench line oscillating between the trees. Fighting of course continues, but mostly through artillery strikes. We saw how drones equipped with thermal cameras were extremely lethal, because troops on the ground could not escape them. In response, some Russian units were equipped with infrared anti-thermal cloaks. Did it work? Hard to say. A video was released on the 28th of April, where we see an entire Russian rifle squad advancing at night using these cloaks. But then they were picked off one by FPV drones. Literally no pity. Poor guys. I mean, we could also look at it the other way around. The fact that it's the only unit equipped with cloaks that was spotted could indicate that all the others passed through undetected. While all this was taking place, house-to-house fighting continued in Nove. In the last week of April, small Russian specialized assault units rushed into the settlement and cleared one building after another.
We have captured a building, my lord!
They even seem to have discovered a Ukrainian multi-level underground fortress. Similar to the tunnels built by the Viet Cong, the Ukrainians created a powerful network of deep shelters in this area designed for long-term defense. Modern warfare doesn't seem to be friendly to claustrophobic people. You're gonna spend a lot of time on the ground. By the 30th of April, the Russians captured this trench bastion. And according to the map by Deep State UA, Nove was effectively caught in a pincer. However, according to Russian reports, they had already cleared the entire village. I mean, they have pretty solid evidence because there was footage of men of the 144th Guards Motor Rifle Division raising their banner at multiple locations, including on the western edge of Nove.
All hope is failing, my lord! The battle is almost done!
So, who's lying? I don't know, I'm just giving you the information and you're gonna decide. Here I even have an exclusive interview to show you from one of the assault detachment commanders that stormed Nove, courtesy of the Telegram channel Operational Space for the English translation. Go check them out, they do great work.
Позывной Гриф, зовут Андрей. С группами, маленькими группами стали заходить в НП Новое через посадки. Вот. Враг, конечно, не дремлет, давал отпор, но в основном противник, ну что, вроде 77-я бригада там. Местами бежал, прятался, местами достаточно плотным огнем накрывал нас. Были моменты, фипивишки у нас вообще просто не давали нам вылезти из посадки, сбросы. Птичники у них, конечно, прям работают плотно, очень плотно. Тяжело, ну, как-то потихоньку зашли. Наши ребята, птичники, вообще молодцы. Они там и сетями их, и таранами. Вот, где-то там мы стрелкатню избивали.
The spectacular campaign also came at a cost for Russia. Apparently, a number of units of the 254th Motor Rifle Regiment had to be withdrawn to restore combat capability, aka because of heavy losses. A couple kilometers to the east of Nove, the Russian 20th Army also managed to advance 1.5 kilometers. Some soldiers were given the criminal order to cross an open field in complete daylight, and to no surprise, they were immediately zeroed in by enemy drones. Once again, maybe those guys were part of the second wave, and due to their lack of experience, didn't take the proper precautions against UAVs. May 2025. On the 2nd of May, a group of Ukrainians inspected a curious medieval-looking Russian armored vehicle. Was it a relic of the past, or another prank by Donbass coal miners? Unfortunately for them, they couldn't find anything valuable inside. Unfortunately for these Ukrainian scavengers, they got chased down by FPV drones and only 2 of them seem to have made it out alive. Not far from there, a group of Russian infantrymen advanced along this Balka we mentioned earlier. Shortly after, they were intercepted by Ukrainian drones. The problem for the AFU is that this took place 1,200 meters behind the contact line. On the 3rd of May, this area north of Torske was marked as part of the Grey Zone. In reality, this sector was already firmly in Russian hands. All the Ukrainians could do was to harass the enemy by launching drone after drone. UAVs are great to inflict casualties on the enemy, but it doesn't allow you to retake the lost ground. This sector was defended by the 63rd Mechanized Brigade. To motivate the troops for the upcoming battle, the commanding officer of the brigade, Colonel Pavlo Yurchuk, went to congratulate some riflemen on the day of the infantry. While things were simmering in the south, the situation in Nove was boiling over. On the 4th of May, the Russian 154th Division cleared the salient south of the settlement of Nove, while another pincer pushed 2 kilometers towards Novomikhailivka. Whatever Ukrainian forces were still in Nove were now in deep trouble, but according to Deep State UA, the village was still not fully captured. For the north, the 20th Combined Arms Army renewed its attacks in Makivka. On the 6th of May, infantry units of the 252nd Motor Rifle Regiment departed from this area, which Ukrainian drones bombarded in late April, and in small groups they advanced 1,000 meters. Little break for everyone to watch the parade in Moscow, and it's only by the 10th of May that Deep State UA expanded the Grey Zone, after which they conceded all these tree lines. The dugouts west of Makivka were now getting filled with Russian soldiers. This is also the area where a couple days earlier the Russians advanced to the Balka. The Russian commander in Makivka was really pushing his men. And now, the moment of truth. On the 14th of May, Nove officially came under Russian control. By that time, assault detachments of the Russian armed forces were already pushing against the 66th Mechanized Brigade in the direction of Ridkodub. Similar situation south of Nove. There, bomber drones of the Ukrainian 60th Mechanized Brigade targeted enemy rifle teams that were already on the outskirts of Kolodyazy. But the 16th of May, Russian bloggers reported that all of Yampolivka and all this area north of Torske was under Russian control. It was also mentioned how the 67th Motor Rifle Division of the 25th Combined Arms Army started pushing deep inside Torske. As you can see, Russian troops are SWAT raiding homes, CQBing their way from one building to another, and at last raising the Russian banner right at the center of the village. Finally, after all this time camping!
Did you see that? Very proud of myself. Honestly, I'm feeling great. I think everyone here should feel great.
So how can you explain this military disaster for the armed forces of Ukraine? The two main mistakes from the AFU are the following. Number one, the Ukrainian High Command underestimated the crisis, and because of the centralization of reserves, reinforcements arrived too late. By then, infantry units had already been severely depleted, and many positions had to be abandoned. Number two, the confusing operational structure of the operational groupings in that part of the front, which made command and control very chaotic, thus weakening the junction between different brigades. Essentially the same problems as in spring 2024. Now on the other side, with the end of the Battle of Kursk, the Russians also got some valuable reinforcements. According to some rumors, the Russian army command along the Luhansk-Kharkiv border shifted its main efforts away from Kupiansk. It was also mentioned that the zone of operations of the 20th Army was reinforced by assets from the 1st Tank Army initially operating around Kupiansk. For example, units of the 15th Motor Rifle Regiment of the 2nd Motor Rifle Division of the 1st Tank Army have already been spotted near the village of Nove. What's crazy is that the Russian command is not only maneuvering brigades, but entire armies across the map. What can we expect next? Just like I stated in my previous videos, for the AFU in the sector, the goal is to maintain control over Lyman, whose approaches have been heavily fortified. In theory, this means everything else can be abandoned, while friendly troops fall back towards Festung Lyman. Overall, for Ukraine, this will be one of 3 strong points to hold at all costs on the east bank of the Oskol River. Kupiansk in the north, Borova in the center, and then Lyman in the south. So there are multiple options open to the Russian command. So I think the most likely course of action for the Russian armed forces is the following. Since troops of the 20th Army are already pushing towards Ridkodub, Novimir, and Kharkivka, we can think the objective of this Russian army is to liquidate this salient up north. To do so, positions in the center will be held by reinforcements coming from Kupiansk, namely the incompetent regiments from the 1st Tank Army, while the 20th Army carries on its offensive northwards. to flank this ridgeline going from Kopanki, Cherneshchina, all the way to Olhivka. Essentially, the goal would be to bring the front line to this position, which was the initial goal of Russia's 2024 summer offensive in this direction. There's also a political aspect to this battle plan, since it would bring to near completion the capture of Luhansk Oblast for Russia, one of the two separatist republics of the Donbass. Another course of action would be to focus southwards, order both the 20th and 25th Combined Arms armies to march in the direction of Lyman. That way they could benefit from a clear numerical advantage to crush enemy positions and take the Ukrainian defense into a pincer. So as you can see, it's extremely critical for the AFU. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to the channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support the channel, make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal. The links are in the description below.